Today, we're going to be talking about episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Andor and why this show may not be for someone like me, but maybe for someone like you. Let's get started. How do you do, G-Pop crew? It's your Naughty Buddy Putty here, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about Andor, episode 1, 2, and 3. We're going to be talking pacingly about the show and what I think about it, and break down some of the things I might have seen. This is going to be a little bit different because I was going to do all 3 episodes separately, but I decided I'm going to go ahead and leave it as is and have the title name right here for when I'm referring to that episode. So with that being said, let's just make this easy and get started with talking about, well, first off, what do I think of this? I'm conflicted with the show. I feel like I know who this audience for is more the NCIS drama or action, like the Fugitive kind of situation, more in the Star Wars world. Honestly, this is the type of movie that you don't really need Star Wars to exist for this show to exist, because everything is put right in front of you. Bad law, breaking the laws. I mean, it feels like something that would be made for basic television that just has a Star Wars overlay over it. And honestly, there's a lot of things we can go through, so I'm going to try to go through everything I can when it comes to any simple Easter eggs, things that might be of attention. If not, we'll just skim by those episodes and talk about what potentially happened in those episodes. Now, for episode 1, they call it Kassa. That's short for Cassian, aka Andor's name. You're going to hear that name a lot throughout this episode and throughout this series. One thing I want to point out is I sat down and did some homework, and honestly, everything I found, I had no idea where they came from, and I think they directly come from this show. There's a lot of planets that they're naming off that don't even reminisce to me or anything like that, outside of stuff that may have happened maybe in Rogue One, or just in general new in this show. Now, I thought about, okay, let's go through all the creatures, but every time I do that, it's a long-winded thing, and they're just repeating creatures from other movies just because they have them available in the Creature Effects studio. So, we know with this first episode, we see that he's clearly gets in trouble because of these 2 guards, only because he's looking for his sister. And this all stems back to the idea that we eventually find out that his world was more primitive, even to our society. And I've always thought about that when it comes to the world of Star Wars, because we already have the primitive nature that they put in when it came to the Ewoks and all the machines, and they didn't have machines. And now we see it on the human side of things, when someone goes from being part of a civilization that doesn't know of even spaceships and things of nature. But we'll get into that later. So, of course, Andor ends up in trouble here because he protected himself, and in return does something he shouldn't have done, which was shoot the other guy, but he didn't want to get in trouble. That shows, again, there's this whole anti-hero thing going on with this, that, again, all of this could have been done without being in a Star Wars series, but I do know and witness the grander scale of what they're doing with this series. I enjoyed this episode. This is probably the episode I enjoyed the most out of all 3 episodes, which does give me fear on what's to come. And of course, during his path to finding his sister, this encounter happens, the death of these 2 guards happens, and now he goes down a path of becoming a wanted criminal. Even though someone was going to shut it down just because they didn't want any criminal acts attempting to be happening. So it's a little bit weird. And the Imperial soldiers that you see in this are definitely the ones you don't have a familiarity to. Different fields of suits, different coloration, and that does happen in the world of Star Wars when it comes to characters. They do have that different feel, a different look. So it's understandable, and I like the new vibe for this when it comes to be feeling like it's in Star Wars, but it's also in its own world. But that also makes me feel like it's not really connected to Star Wars in a very kinetical sense outside of the rebellion and all the things that happened with Rogue One. Which also leads me to something else I want to discuss later. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and jump into episode 2 and talk about what happens there, because at the end of this episode, we do see that he is now taking command, and we do see that he's taking whatever necessary traits he can. Here we see that he's definitely looking for some comms, which we later are a bad idea, and I do like the dogs. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about where he ends up when it comes to navigating into episode 2. Now, before I get into episode 2, I did realize something as I was rolling over. I forgot to talk about a few things. First off, if you notice, it says BBY5, okay? This is a time frame of years before the Battle of Yavin happens. So this is actually before Rogue One, and of course before A New Hope. So if you have seen Rogue One, you remember that he's actually an outlaw on the run. And as I stated in the beginning of this episode, that's where he ends up in this situation, which is where it's going to take the whole series that's going to lead into Rogue One. I don't foresee them doing several seasons of this unless it's popular and they keep it open for him to have more. But honestly, I don't feel I myself would have the attention span to stick with this story as much if it expands even further to continue on with beyond Rogue One, which it really can't if you know what happens in Rogue One. Offshoot chance. I just had to make sure I explain. Oh, and then the Battle of Yavin. Again, I'm not really doing much good of explaining, but Battle of Yavin is the battle that happens in A New Hope. At the end of A New Hope, that's the Battle of Yavin. Anyway, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with episode 2. Now, let's start with the obvious thing that is probably going to be asked is, what is this? This is just a container, but it looks a lot like Vader's chess piece. But you'll also notice that as he tilts it, you'll actually see the Imperial symbol on it as well, right there. So it is something that is a little unique, I think, in my eyes, that they use those two things to make a box. I'd want one of these boxes. I think it's cool looking, but it definitely screams Darth Vader vibes 100%. But of course, this box is used to collect or to be sold, I guess because it's a valuable item, sold to the gentleman so he can get off planet. So this is where we end up in this episode, where he is trying to find ways of making that extra money, and one of those is an Imperial item that probably would get him killed if found that he owns this. So of course, take it out, get it off your hands, get it somewhere else that's needed. Now, I don't know the value of it, to be honest with you, because honestly, if there was any value pointed out for this, I missed it, because this is where I felt the show was going slow. This is where it started climbing, and I guess because there wasn't much action, but it's Star Wars. I feel like you need to pump up the action a little more, and this is where I feel like the bump hit a lot with it. A lot of discussion. We see this guy drumming 3 times on the big, or twice on the bell. Like, the pacing on this is getting slow, and for some people that might be great the way the pacing is, and I like the dialogue. I love some of the dialogue. It has a very Kevin Smith, Law and Order feel, or just a criminal show kind of situation, but not enough to keep me held when it comes to me coming in as a Star Wars fan and seeing it. I feel like I might be the only one that actually has a little bit of problem staying with the pace of this. It's getting boring to me, unfortunately, and hopefully it picks up after episode 3, but episode 2 is where I feel the decline actually happened when it came to the episodes, and feel things are getting slower. Now, I do like the little moments, like, for example, these two right here. They're trying to figure out the whole the whole sorry, Canary. I'm forgetting the planet name where Andor comes from. Again, this is not a planet that's ever been in any comic books, or for sure movies. So it's definitely a miss on that one. But I mean, outside of maybe some simple shifts, some aliens, there's really not much as far as Easter eggs or anything like that. But we do see that. Well, first off, this gentleman right here is very awkward and uncomfortable as a general, or a leader. And then we do have this gentleman here that is actually the buyer of the box. And of course, we don't find that out till episode 2 that he's the buyer. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into that, because honestly, episode 2 was quite boring for me. And then finally, we have episode 3, and this is where we get more backstory of a younger Andor, and of course, the box he's selling to the gentleman on the last one. Now, this episode may actually be better than the second episode, but it still has a pacing that's a little bit boring. Like, I like the idea of a primitive beings, or aliens. I don't want to call them aliens. They're not humans either. They're their own species, but a primitive species basically that never seen a spaceship before. That is a nice concept, but at the same time, it doesn't hold well to me. I get it. It makes Andor really kind of a badass character, to be honest with you, but it doesn't hold me enough to really get me excited. And then we finally get to some action, but the pacing of the action even seems slow. It doesn't feel deserving. You finally see that Andor actually meets up with the gentleman that is going to purchase the item, and they end up escaping together. Maybe there's not a chemistry I'm seeing there. Honestly, I'm going to be very honest with you. I was really excited for this, and as I started watching this, and I even tried to relax to watch it. Maybe that was too much, but in order to me to the only times I actually felt myself awake was when I took a moment away from it. This show may be popular to people, but my feeling for it is that it's very slow pacing. And I don't want people to think, oh, because it doesn't have the lightsabers and it doesn't have all the action, but it feels like I'm watching something that is visually looks like something that might be Star Wars, but it feels like a fan film. Can I say that? Is that the best way to put it? It feels like a really good fan film. And I don't know. Honestly, it's really upsetting that how Andor in my eyes felt. And I feel like I'm enjoying She-Hulk more than this. And I still haven't done the Harley Quinn. And I also have another series I just ended up watching that I'm going to end up dropping the short for as well, too. So, Andor is low on my pot of enjoyable shows. And that's scary to me when I feel like it has way more talent behind it. Has way more opportunity to grow as something special, because it doesn't have the weight of having to use everything in the Star Wars world to make it good. It's not like Boba Fett, where we have to have something special about Boba Fett that we love or that we already had before, or like Obi-Wan and Anakin's story. Like, this is something that wasn't part of any book or already any ongoing story outside of the Rebellion and the Empire. So for me, honestly, I'm really scared how this series is going to go. I'm hoping that maybe this it's slow. That's the reason why they gave us the first 3, and after this, it's going to ramp up. I don't know, but at least I've caught up, and that was my biggest concern. So I'm caught up now. Don't know where it's going to go. I'll have to find out. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below. Did you guys actually like Andor? Do you feel the pacing is good? Am I completely off on this? Because I don't mind if people disagree with me. Actually, I want this to be enjoyable by people, because there's always a world where I want Star Wars to succeed, no matter what pacing it might be. But this one doesn't feel like it's for me. And if it is good, then it's probably just me. Just being honest. And with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys when episode 4 comes out, as well as the She-Hulk review, the eventual Harley Quinn review, and a special short review that I'm going to do for another series that dropped. And then we'll be back on pace, because we still have Halloween coming up, and a certain weird movie to review as well. But with that being said, as always, I'm Putty with the G-Plot crew, and this is my short review of Andor 2, episodes 1, 2, and 3. And I'll see you guys in the next review for 4, you see. I love to rhyme, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.